Hey YouTube, Gotham Comics here with another video. I'm going to do something very different than what I normally do. Don't have a haul, though if you follow me on Instagram, you certainly know I've picked up a few new books. You have an idea of what some of those new books are, but I'm going to wait a little bit longer before I do another haul. I'm going to tackle my origin story into comics, into YouTube, basically why I do this. I've touched on it very briefly, but in no great detail whatsoever. I know for a lot of people my age, and I'm very young even by YouTube comic collecting standards and Instagram standards, a lot of people my age, I think, are the new generation of collectors, in part because of media like the movies and the toys and the TV shows and the Netflix. I like all of that, but that's not my reason for being into comic books and being into collecting. I don't know of anyone who has a story that is like mine. So I'm going to jump into it right now, and hopefully you enjoy it. In front of me here, we have the first comic book I ever bought. This isn't the exact copy I bought. The copy I bought of Peter Parker, Spider-Man #3, cover art by John Romita Jr., was actually read. I love the book, and all I have of it now is the back cover. And to be quite honest, I don't even know where that is, though I'm sure if I dug around I could probably find it. Anyway, that was me making a feeble attempt to find it. I got this book one afternoon with my mother when I was about 6 years old. I liked Spider-Man because of the TV show on Fox Kids, which I've talked about at length in a few videos. And I bought the book and I read it a bunch of times and I really loved it. And that was pretty much it for comics. I mean, not that I didn't like them, I just didn't really seek them out. Very strangely, the place I did see comics out was in Italy. When I was 8, we went and visited my grandparents in Italy. They both still live there. And they happen to live in a part of the country that is very quiet. It's very rural. It's up in the mountains. So you can take day trips to Rome and Naples and the islands. It's actually very enjoyable when you get out. But when you're stuck inside, like, there's just not a lot to do. Not a lot of people. No stores. No restaurants, really. It's just a very kind of isolated place in the mountains of Italy. So when I went into town, I remember buying this book. This is, I speak Italian fluently, but L'Ere di Apocalisse, X-Men Speciale Apocalisse. Basically, it's an apocalypse story, part 5 of 6, and the whole comic is in Italian. It's actually translated from English into Italian by Marvel Italia. Anyway, so this was my main form of entertainment when I was there and not conversing with family or out and about in the town. When I was indoors, this is what I did. I either spoke with family or I read this comic. And it's pretty long. The thing about at least Italian comics, I don't know about elsewhere in Europe or anywhere else in the world, is that they wait for like a small bundle of comics, of single issues, to get published, and then they combine them all into like a mini volume. So this is probably like 5 comic books in one, or maybe 4 in one. So again, you know, I took this home with me. I loved the artwork, loved the story, but again, I didn't really pursue collecting. And then I went back to Italy, and same thing. A little bit older this time. I was, I don't know, maybe 13. And I'd get these Spider-Man stories. And I loved them, and the artwork was great, and I was totally into them, and I read them a bunch of times. Look at this artwork. I think this is Terry Dodson, if I'm not mistaken, who did it on all of these. So I loved every one of them. But again, it didn't stick. Then I studied abroad. I studied abroad in Rome for 1 semester when I was in college. It was my junior year. And I was in Rome, as I said, and I loved it. You know, my family's Italian. I speak Italian fluently, like I said. I love the culture. I love Italy very much. But inevitably, when you're in a foreign country, away from your family, away from your friends, away from your native-born culture, you are going to get a little homesick. So there are some things that Skype calls with my parents and friends back home at my university, you know, things that they couldn't fix. I just wanted America. And I remember, it's funny, there was a convenience store, really nice convenience store in my area of Rome where I lived, and they sold this peanut butter, this organic peanut butter that they make in the town next to where I currently live. But it was like 12 euros for like a jar of peanut butter, which is like 15 bucks, if you can imagine paying 15 bucks for a jar of peanut butter. And they had other stuff like Oreos too, but I digress. That didn't really, I didn't buy the peanut butter. But the Oreos, the Americanized stuff that you could find in that convenience store, that didn't do it either. I remember one day I was coming home from school in my neighborhood and I went by a newsstand. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but to find comics at a newsstand today is ridiculous. Because, first of all, how many newsstands are there? How many newsstands are there in New York, Boston, LA, Chicago, anywhere? You just don't have them. And now as a collector, I know that comics were everywhere. You know, they were in truck stops and gas stations and convenience stores and newsstands. They were everywhere. Not today. But in Italy, and this is still true today, they have comics available at newsstands. And this actually isn't the first one I bought. This one is the first one I bought. And I remember reading it, and it's still completely in Italian. The whole book is written in Italian. I mean, it's the American story, obviously. But, and I believe this is Dan Slott. Yeah, it's Dan Slott and Giuseppe Camuncoli who did the artwork. You guys didn't realize I spoke Italian. Now I'm wowing you with all this translation and all this accent. But anyway, this is the Marvel story, just been translated into Italian. And even though I was reading Italian, and I was in a foreign country, and I bought this with euros, not dollars, even with all that, this reminded me of home. And so as I mentioned before, because there are 4 or 5 issues in this book, they didn't come out very often. Maybe one came out once every month and a half. And I was only in Italy for 5 months. So I backtracked and I bought this issue here, 584, and this issue here, 585. If you'll recognize these are from kind of the last run of issues before Amazing Spider-Man 700, before Peter Parker allegedly temporarily dies, spoiler alert, and it turns into Superior Spider-Man. So these books reminded me of home, and I love them. Whether they were in Italian or not was really irrelevant. I just, for some reason, whenever I needed to pick me up, whenever pizza, walking by the Coliseum, visiting my grandparents, whenever that didn't work, and I needed to think of America, I read translated Amazing Spider-Man volumes. Now, that's not the end of the story. My mom visited me in November. And in my neighborhood, where I was living in Rome, my mom visited me with my grandma and my aunt. In the neighborhood I was living in Rome, there was an indie comic book store. And when I say indie comic book store, I don't mean comics. I mean some comics and a whole lot of art. I picked up a bunch of prints of Spider-Man, of the X-Men, just really, really high quality stuff. And you're not going to get a sense of it until you see it. So this is the first thing I bought from this guy in the Prati section of Rome. This is a sketchbook by Gabriele Dell'Otto, or as Americans say, Gabriele Dell'Otto. He actually illustrated the Spider-Verse covers a year and a half or 2 years back. Gabriele Dell'Otto is one of the greatest Marvel artists, or artists period. I'm going to flip through his sketchbook. I bought this, and all of a sudden the wheels started to turn. All of a sudden, there's Hellboy. All of a sudden, that artwork that I hear ETA Nick describing is gorgeous and beautiful, and Cougar Comics, Hero Hunter 81, Mercenaut, Lightning 2288, Reaper Tate, Dr. Von Chilla, all these guys, they talk about artwork as if they've seen these comics for the first time. And when I looked at the sketchbook for the first time, it was like seeing comics for the first time. Just, they looked less childish and just more sophisticated. Look at that. This is Gabriele Dell'Otto. So, at that point, after flipping through this book, I think I knew, A, I needed more of this, that Iron Man, and B, I needed to find out what the hell was going to happen in English in this story once I got home, and I knew I didn't want to wait a month and a half to find out, or more. For the record, this isn't the last Dell'Otto item I got. I picked up his sketchbooks. His 2009 sketchbook. I cannot find these anywhere online. So if you can find them, grab them because they're awesome. He came and did a signing at the comic book store. He actually did a... he illustrated The Wizard of Oz. And I got these Wizard of Oz, Dorothy and Scarecrow. And actually he autographed it right there. Pretty cool. I'm just going to flip through these a little bit. Just awesome, awesome, awesome. Look at that Joker. His black and white stuff is incredible. And his color stuff, he's black and white. I mean, look at that Joker again. Great. Another one. SpiderMan is just incredible. Anyway, I can't do all of them because I'm afraid I'm going to run out of battery. Look at that, Mr. Freeze and Batman. I want a Batman 121. He's got just Doctor Strange. Man, like I wish I could do it all justice, you know. So anyway, these books, getting these sketchbooks fueled an awakening. I visited the store multiple times. Look at this. Wolverine eating steak with his claws. It's awesome. Honest to God, if you guys can find this sketchbook, just go out. Look at that vulture. Go out and get it. This is honest to God, I would not trade these books for, I don't know, I mean, let's put it this way, I would not trade these books for a major key. I can say that with full confidence. Look at that Spider-Man and Magneto. And then the last sketchbook. These are just, if it makes sense, they're part of my identity as a collector. Like, they weren't my first comics, but these were the linchpins, you know? It was like, this just made me feel, look at that. I don't know if this is Donald Duck or Howard the Duck, because they often look the same, but look at that Batman. Jesus. Whew. I mean, beautiful, beautiful stuff. Anyway. These just made me feel different about comics, and it was a combination, Black Cat. It it was a combination of feeling at home, not being homesick anymore, and you know, just kind of opened up a new hobby. And I'll tell you what, once I got home, it really got addicting. I went back to the only comic book store I knew about, which was that first one where I bought my Peter Parker Spider-Man #3, which I showed you. I let off the video. There's Nosferatu, Colossus. Look at that, man. Ugh, incredible, incredible artwork. I wish I could have a better angle for you. Look at that, pre-Civil War stuff, guys. Anyway, so I went to the store, introduced myself. Kamikaze in Somerville, Mass. If you're ever in Boston, hit them up. Great guys. And it was the same week as this coming out, Amazing Spider-Man 700. And I got it. And I've gotten every, well, not anymore, but I got all of Superior Spider-Man and some of Volume 3 Amazing Spider-Man. I didn't really like it. Now I'm focused almost exclusively on back issues, which you all know about. But everything, I don't know. I always liked comics. But in terms of making it a hobby, in terms of making it something that I'm dedicated at, never really had that until I went to Italy. And I kind of just missed home. And I got to know comics in a different way. You know, it's like they tied me back to who I was and where I came from. And since then, you know, I went from this wanting to know the Spider-Man story to tracking down all the Spideys I can, to going to flea markets and rummaging for back issues and going to Comic-Con. And I really evolved as a collector. But I fondly look back at my time in Italy and how it was kind of like the birth of me getting into comics. Hero Hunter 81 once said that he was a bunch of collectors shoved into one person. I totally identify with that. I feel that way. I'm a DC collector and a Marvel collector and a Spider-Man collector, and I really like rare stuff and I love nice art. And I think that's okay. You know, I think it's okay to like a bunch of things and not stick with one kind of way of collecting. With YouTube, I honestly don't know how I got into it. I think that one day I was typing into my search bar Amazing Spider-Man collection and a bunch came up and I learned about the Spider-Man runs that way. And then I think as I got more and more into collecting and I wanted some key issues, I looked up underrated comic books and I stumbled upon SpideyFan78CT, who was the first real YouTuber I watched, and I saw his top 25 most underrated keys, which I did my own version of last week. So I've now been collecting more than 4 years, and I've got, I think, just a really nice collection. Not the best, but it's more than respectable, and I've been patient, and I've got some badass stuff. But these may not be comics, but these remain very close to my heart because of what they did to bring me here. So anyway, that's my story. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too boring. I hope I narrated it okay. I'll get back to doing hauls soon. Let me know your thoughts. You know, give me a comment. Give me a dislike if you want. I don't care. It means you watched the video. So anyway, Gotham Comics out.